to Musicians Roundtable. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, and today we're very excited to have as our guests the great musicians Andrea Dieci from Italy, the classical guitarist, and also Ben Salfield, the great English lutenist. They are in Poland and just about to embark on a concert tour where they're going to be playing Elizabethan lute duets from the Elizabethan Golden Age. So, Ben, how was your trip over?
Oh, it was fine, thank you, Jeffrey. It's great to be back speaking to you again. It was I started off at 6:30 this morning and got here at about 6:30 this evening. So it's been quite a long day, but thoroughly enjoyable. Nice to meet up with Andrea and other old friends as well.
Andrea, how was your trip? I gather it might not have been as long of a journey for you.
Hi, Jeffrey. Mine travel was shorter. It was fine. Just a couple of hours flight from Milan to Krakow. Very easy, very smooth.
Excellent. So I wanted to ask you, Andrea, what guitar will you be playing? Who's the maker, and what can you tell us about the guitar that you'll be using?
I'm using a guitar by an Italian maker. His name is Giancarlo Nannoni. It's a new guitar that I'm trying in this period. It's a very nice instrument, and those will be the first concerts I will perform on this instrument. It's a very nice guitar.
Oh, wonderful. And Ben, can you introduce, for those who may not be familiar with it, the instrument that you're playing, the lutar?
Yes, the lutar is a 10-course instrument with 6 single strings and 4 paired strings, which takes what I believe are the best elements of the lute and the classical guitar and melds them together. It's like a sort of bass, vihuela, and mano, really, in many regards. And it's been specifically designed by Kif Wood, who's a Cornish maker, who's a fantastic innovator of design and technology. And it took a long time to create. It's a completely unique instrument. And it was designed over 3 or 4 months using all sorts of computer simulations of sound and modern ideas with regards to making. For example, it's held together mainly with carbon fiber rods. And the idea was to make something that was louder than a Renaissance lute, that was much sturdier and hardier, because I've had problems in the past when touring of having instruments destroyed by airlines. And this one travels very well.
Oh, great. I noticed from your previous recordings that the guitar and the lutar make a wonderful sound together, and it'll be really interesting. I'm hoping that you'll be able to make some recordings of your concerts while you're moving about Poland this week or so.
Yes, we're going to be doing that, in fact, aren't we? We're recording, all the concerts will be recorded live, so there'll be some footage going out at some point.
Wonderful. Now I'm going to place onto the screen with a sharing thing a couple of the images about the tour, and we can have a discussion of what we're looking at. I'll just bring this up. Bear with me while I do it. So here we have a poster, really, of your duo, Elizabethan lute duets of the Golden Age. And there's a wonderful quote of William Shakespeare. And how did you come about finding that quote?
Well, really, it was when the designer was looking at the thing and said, what do we need to put there? And I said, well, we need something kind of, we need some kind of Elizabethan quote that just shows off how necessary music is. I think it's the cornerstone of civilization. I think music, art, poetry. Without them, we're not humans as we know it. And I think that's what one of the big campaigns that we have all the time is to try and get this as an accepted idea in English schools and so on, because in an era which is much more barbaric in many ways than the Elizabethan era, these are the sorts of things that civilized people can return to, and I think that Shakespeare quote kind of puts that out. So,
yeah, very, very appropriate. Now, I'm going to
I
bring
actually
up...
found that one myself, I should say. I'm going to take full credit for that. I even said where it should be done and what typeface. So.
All well done. Now, I'm going to bring up an image of the book from which I believe all of your concerts are coming. And this is the book Elizabethan Lute Duets of the Golden Age, the ultimate collection. I think in this case, it's probably true because I don't think it's ever taken place before.
I'm not going to make claims quite like that, but I hope that's the case. Certainly, I've gone back to all the original sources when finding there's 210 pages of music in 5 volumes with one in a box set. It's coming out in about a month. It's all sort of green cloth and gold leaf writing in a boxed set, and it really covers, I think, over 95% of English Renaissance duets, unless they find another manuscript that's been lost for 400 years. I've pretty much covered everything in that, and it took quite a while to get together, mainly sort of 4 or 5 a.m., sort of sitting there scouring through old handwritten manuscripts and so on, which is really what I like doing at 4 and 5 in the morning.
I wanted to ask Andrea, how are you faring playing your parts in these duets from the Renaissance tablature? Are you comfortable with that? And what is your experience of that?
Yes, I'm comfortable with the tablature. I learned to read the tablature when I was very young, and I did many transcriptions. So I'm very familiar with the Italian tablature notation and the French, which is also the English tablature notation. It's not a problem. I'm not as confident as with notation, but I can play a concert reading from tablature. So it's,
you've shown
okay.
that already. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to begin a discussion now of the program itself. And this music is absolutely among my favorite musics of all. And particularly, I think the lute duets are fantastic, both for concerts and for teaching materials and so forth. So in the program, we see that there are some of the iconic composers, John Johnson, Thomas Robinson, the famous Anon, Richard Allison, Ellis Lowry, and then finishing with John Johnson. So I'd like to see now, I just wanted to ask you quickly, are all of these pieces in the book itself?
Yes, they are, yes.
Okay.
The program is, it almost started off as a promotion of English lute duets in general when we got the idea of the duo together, and also when I got the idea of the book together. I felt that as repertoire that's, say, recorded and talked about, everybody, say in the classical guitar world, knows about John Dowland. You know, everyone knows of Weiss. And very few people talk about John Johnson, Thomas Robinson, and these sorts of composers. So it was almost like a bit of a promotional blitz on their behalf, posthumously.
Yes. Andrea, I wanted to ask you about your experience of these composers. Is your connection with this music somewhat new for you, or had you been playing Renaissance English music for a long time?
I've played the Renaissance music for lute, but I've not played many duets before. Only the most famous one, like the Dowland piece and the
Lord Willoughby.
Yes, the Toy by Robinson, the Rossignol, those very famous pieces. But I didn't know many of the pieces that Ben sent me. And some things are really amazing. Like I love the Allison pieces.
Yes.
I was not familiar with this composer, and it's really great music, great. And also from the instrumental point of view, it's quite difficult to play. because there are many fast divisions which are extremely unpredictable. So it's so easy to get lost, especially when you read from tablature.
You know, when you start reading through some of the treble sections, and you think that you know the pattern, and then suddenly something comes out and hits you in the face, and you wonder, whoa, what happened there? Yeah.
That's really great music, and it was very exciting discovery for me.
It's also I don't know if you know, amongst lutanists, quite a few people use the trebles as a sort of training exercise, especially for right hand technique, because I don't know how much most guitarists know about lute technique in general, but when it started, the lute, of course, was played with the plectrum originally, and then by the start of the 16th century, it moved to what they call the thumb inside technique, where the thumb and the first finger were alternating, playing on a single string. And as time moved on, they moved to what they call the thumb outside technique. And this was taken probably from Spanish vihuela music. And then eventually by 1615 or thereabouts, using the MI alternation that we know from classical guitar. When you had a larger instrument and the basses needed the thumb sort of attached down there. But this stuff early on was a very different style of playing, and a lot of guitarists now, when they play it, don't get that kind of right feel to the music, which is one of the reasons I wanted to play this stuff with Andrea more than anybody else, because I knew that he would, and he does. So it was very special to be able to play with Andrea.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Andrea, have you adapted some of your classical guitar technique for this music? Or do you mostly approach it just from a purely musical standpoint of doing the duet with Ben and making the music come as you would visualize it in your imagination?
Well, I try to stick to the tablature as much as possible in terms of the fingering. For example, I don't use slurs, which are not used except for ornaments. Also in the quick passages, no slurs. I try to play with alternating fingering, but trying to sound like the lute articulation, which I know quite well because I've also played the lute for some time. So I try to be true to the style, but of course I play on a modern guitar, so I also have to deal with the difference of the instrument, which has a different string tension, and it's not really the same feeling playing it on the guitar.
I think what's interesting is that because you have some guitarists playing with nails have quite a hard sound, and you have a very soft sound. And I have a relatively hard sound for someone who plays without nails. I use what Mace called the nibble end of the finger, the skin on the end of the finger. And I think, and the fact you tune your guitar up into F,
yes,
and my lutar, which was designed for F sharp stroke G tuning, I tune down to F as well. And so we have the instruments to tune the same, and somehow they sound as though they're designed to be played together.
It's a very good match.
An odd couple that works very well.
From what I've heard of your recordings, it's a really magnificent blend of sounds. You have the individuality, but there's no sense of a mismatch, which is really easily something that can take place if you have different instruments with either the guitar or, in Ben's case, the lutar. Now, Ben, can you talk a little bit about John Johnson? Do we know anything about his life?
We don't know much about any of these composers' lives, really, not in what we call modern terms. John Johnson was described as one of the three lutes at Elizabeth I's court, and he died in around 1595, and that was often thought to mean that only three lute players were employed at Elizabeth I's court, which of course is a nonsense. What it turns out it means is that he was one of the three players of three sizes of lute that would have been played in consort, not in a broken consort necessarily with a viol da gamba and different instruments, but played in a sort of group of lutes playing together. And I found, for example, in the book, various pieces that were described as consort pieces, which the modern person might interpret to mean there was a lute treble part with bass of some sort and other instruments, actually meant that three sorts of size of lute were being played together. And so you can actually find various ground or bass parts that were described as being consort that were simply in a different tuning and were different size. And if you transcribe those, you find an amazing wealth of extra pieces that we didn't even know existed in full. John Johnson, though, was probably the greatest duet composer of his day. I mean, I think there's very little doubt about that.
Yes, and so I'm looking at the titles of his songs, and I'm really interested in this one that's called Green Garters. Now,
yeah, we were both interested in the Green Garters. well, I mean, I don't really know if I ought to even vaguely comment on that, but obviously,
was there an Elizabethan equivalent of the Victoria's Secret catalog that this was?
Yeah, I think this was. I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. But green seemed to be a popular color, didn't it? You had obviously the leaves be green. You had green sleeves, yes. Green garters. These are a lot of what people often don't realize is that lute music, in many regards, a lot of it was folk music of the day. Even music by, say, John Dowland. When he wrote Lord Willoughby's Welcome Home, people think John Dowland wrote Lord Willoughby's Welcome Home. In fact, it's the same tune as a very famous piece called Roland, which is far older than Dowland. And a lot of the time, people were making arrangements of pieces that were known in the day. Take Fortune My Foe, another Dowland classic solo piece. It was popularly known as the hanging song, and it was often played or sung by people when people were being taken to the scaffold to be done away with, and these sorts of pieces, people have an idea now, because we have things like copyright and things like that. They have this idea that the composers wrote the original theme. In fact, a lot of the time they're doing arrangements. They're doing variations on the themes. And I think this makes it, in a way, even better, because you take the classic Walsingham, every Renaissance composer worth his salt wrote a version of Walsingham, as did Anon. Therefore, a lot of the pieces are not necessarily just by that particular person they're ascribed to. Another example is the Leaves Be Green. At least I know of at least 5 composers who wrote versions of The Leaves Be Green, and each one of them will have claimed, "I wrote this."
Yeah, I
wrote it myself.
I recently heard the harpsichord, the version of this piece by some Renaissance composer. I don't remember the name, but it was based on the same theme.
Absolutely, there are. I can think of at least 3 harpsichord versions that were slightly later as well. And we have this idea now that if somebody, like a pop star writes a piece, well, they don't usually have somebody to write it for them. But if somebody brings out a song, it's the song by this particular person, and they've written it, or it's been written on their behalf. And this wasn't always the case. A lot of this was traditional music even then.
Would that also apply to the music of Thomas Robinson? For instance, A Toy for Two Lutes, is that thematic material his own, do you think, or was it based upon other things?
I think that one is. That was from his 1603 book, The School of Music, which is still regarded as one of the best books of instruction for lute from his day. And people, again, nowadays we're very spoiled for choice. If we want to learn guitar, we can find any number of guitar tutors. The best one is by a guy called Geoffrey Goodman. But we'll talk about that I'll interview you about that sometime, Geoffrey. And he's nearly blushing, but not quite. But nowadays there are many books like that. But in Renaissance times, to buy a book of music printed on real paper was an expense. You could pay to buy John Dowland's first book of songs cost apparently the same as a cheap lute.
Well,
Paper
that's
and
something.
ink were expensive things.
That's something that I've been wondering about, which is, do we have, for any of these composers, do we have the actual handwritten manuscripts of the composer itself, as opposed to copied music in various of the collections?
Yeah, we have, with some of them we do, and with many of them we don't. Robinson's book, The School of Music, 1603, I think there must be at least 4 or 5 copies, original copies of that still in existence. And there are books like the 1610 Robert Dowland book, John Dowland's son, The Variety of Lute Lessons, in which John Dowland contributed quite a few pieces. There were also pieces by people like Alfonso Ferrabosco and so on, some of the great sort of big stars of the era. The printed stuff, you can pretty much say, was authentic and was certainly by those people. Though there are a couple of cases. There's one, I can't remember which one it is now. I'm sure somebody will put in a question or something in the question bit, that somebody will put in a comment about it. One of the Robert Dowland described pieces in the Variety of Lute Lessons, actually, the first version we can find of that was from when he was about 2 years old, and appears to have been written by his dad. But I think that was sort of him helping his son out. But a lot of the time, the handwritten manuscripts were by individuals who heard a piece of music or who were taught it and wrote it down. There are a few cases in one of the Cambridge University Library manuscripts, for example, and in the Folger Dowland manuscript in Washington, D.C., where John Dowland's own handwriting exists. And in those cases, you know that it was by this person for certain, and so on. But there are plenty of instances where continental publications included poor variations of Dowland music, where, for example, I'm sure there was one occasion where he commented on a bad version of one of his pieces. And I think this was the problem of the age. We don't know as much as we all pretend we do about it. A lot of it's just made up in what we call modern lute history, which means we get an idea, we have a good idea about that it's probably true, and we stick to that. So.
Yes. Andrea, I was going to ask you, when you are playing together with Ben, and let's say Ben has a lead phrase that you're going to later imitate or repeat exactly. That's kind of like the structure of A Toy for Two Lutes by Robinson that we're discussing. How do you approach doing ornaments live in performance? Are they fully rehearsed, or do you just do them based on what Ben is doing?
Rehearsed? What does that mean?
They are not rehearsed. I mean, in every rehearsal they are different. So we just improvise ornaments, and we try to imitate each other and to follow each other's ideas, which is the nicest way.
There's also these sort of moments where he does, when I play a phrase, he does the imitation, and I'm thinking, hell, that was too good. And then if we repeat the piece, I'm going to try and better that, and then he betters it again. Like, okay, you can have that one.
But sometimes he makes a mistake, and I imitate him so that nobody will notice it.
That's an ultimate supportive ensemble. That's really
what a
something.
Sacrifice it is for Andrea to have to play with me.
Well, having many years ago, a few of these Elizabethan duets were things that I would perform not infrequently. And I absolutely loved having them in the program. They never get
to ask Jeffrey a couple of questions here. Jeffrey, what was your favorite duet to play of the Elizabethan ones?
Well, I like The Toy. I think that John Johnson, doesn't he have a Galliard to the Pavane?
There's a Galliard to the Delight Pavane, but it's incomplete. John Robinson actually put a comment on Facebook about that. You may have heard of him. He's one of the modern greats as far as arranging music is concerned. I didn't know there was a Galliard to that, but there is an incomplete one with the first page missing. But sorry, anyway, I interrupted you as usual.
And Duncombe's Galliard is just beautiful to play.
That's beautiful, yes.
You see, Andrea really improved that piece for me. I'd been playing that piece for 25 years, and we played it the first time, and it sounded good. And he said, "Let's try it really fast now." And I gulped.
Well, it just sounded a bit slow.
It really wasn't that slow, but
it's more sparkling this way.
It's really on the edge, Jeffrey. So, it adds tension. I think in the end of this piece, you could there's an element of tension you can add to it by doing it in this way.
Yeah, I think it has a very happy final section, which sounds more happy with this speed. Yeah.
Well, a reason that I was asking about the original manuscripts is that, for example, in Bach, we have Bach's handwritten copy of his chaconne for solo violin.
Yeah.
And over a lifetime, that handwritten copy can yield so much benefit to people who are studying and playing and performing this piece. And it never runs out. There's no printed edition that could ever be more fruitful than the original composer's handwriting. And so that's why I was asking about these Elizabethan pieces, because if you had Dowland's own hand and you could see perhaps if it was an early manuscript, revisions, ornaments put in or not put in, it would be so beneficial to be able to have access to them.
I can add something quite interesting to that. I'm in the middle of a new book at the moment called The Lutenist Handbook, which is like a sort of an overview, a guide to lute playing, but like a sort of rough guide. I talk about ornamentation in one section, and there's pointed out by Martin Shepherd, the lute maker and scholar, that on this one particular manuscript in Dowland's handwriting, there's a little cluster of dots, and nobody's been able to really work out what does this mean next to a glyph, as we call the little signs, you know, on the tablature, the letters in the French tablature. And he came up with the idea of it meaning vibrato, which sounds like an oddity, but in fact he's probably right. And you get these little things which appear maybe in one or two pieces of music, and you think to yourself, it's like a code. It's a bit like sort of trying to break some kind of mad 400-year-old code. There are is this little cluster of dots, you know, where somebody squashed an ant, you know, that was going across the music, or does it mean something, or was it just, you know, you put it a bit near the candle and there's like a little singe mark that nobody's worked out yet, and you're trying to work these things out, and sometimes it can be quite crazy. Really, it takes quite a lot of wine to get through those things at times.
Well, that's another part of it. Andrea was mentioning how much he loves the music of Richard Allison. And Andrea, what is it about his music that you find so compelling or enthralling to play and to study?
I especially find the harmony is really incredible. Sometimes it sounds kind of modern to my ears, because there are a lot of dissonances, but they blend together so well. I mean, you don't perceive them as something harsh, but at the same time, for instance, you have in the same chord, you have, let's say, C sharp and C natural in different voices, and incredibly, they sound good.
And you're talking to a guy here who just performed the winter music, so
yeah, but it's not so common at that time.
Yeah,
it reminds me of you know, the Mudarra's famous Fantasia, which imitates the harp, and he says in the final section, he says there are some dissonances here, but if you play them well, they will not disturb. They will be nice, and in a way, it's the same kind of feeling, and it makes this music feel quite modern to my ears. And then the divisions, they are so interesting, so rich, so unpredictable, so beautiful to play, and difficult. So it's a kind of a test for the player. I think those were the most scary pieces in our program, the 3 Allison pieces.
Yeah.
When
we played in the UK, I think De La Tromba, when we first looked at it, we both went, "What is going on with this?" And I think I think things like the Spanish measures, it still has some modernistic ideas, despite the fact that it's got a very sort of Spanish Tudor sort of sound to it. But yeah, I think you're quite right.
The regret is that with such a fascinating composer in this case, that we haven't found a nice big fat manuscript of 100 or 200 pieces, because this fellow had to have written an enormous amount of music, and it seems sad that we haven't found more of it.
Yes, I think two world wars in Europe, and and the test of time in other regards, got rid of a lot of lute music, and certainly the former really did destroy quite a few manuscripts. But they're still discovering things today. I mean, it's relatively recently a Weiss manuscript was discovered, wasn't it? And there's in Germany. So there's still hope. Maybe everybody should be rooting around in their lofts looking for the lost Allison. I remember when there was about 3 or 4, possibly more years ago now. There was a manuscript by Beethoven turned up, and I remember I got a phone call from a national newspaper because they knew it was somebody connected with lute music who had found this manuscript, and they rang me up and they said, "Was it you who found the Beethoven?" I said, "What Beethoven?" They said, "Oh, it's not you, bye," and put the phone down. And that was the last I heard. But they do turn up. They do turn up. So
yes. Now, the poster mentions that you may be doing some teaching, some master classes while you're there together. How is that going to work?
Yeah.
We're going to teach 3 master classes in the next 4 days. In Katowice, in Rivnik, and in Żory, in music schools.
Will the students be playing guitar? Will they be playing lute? What instruments will you be
They
working
will be playing guitar, and those playing the ancient music will play for Ben, and those playing the modern repertoire will play for me. So we will teach separately.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting because in Poland I found it's one of the countries where, because of the way the education system works here, it's far more advanced in many regards than what I'm used to in the UK with regards to things like music and the arts. And you can decide you're going to specialize and go to a music school when you're going to what we call secondary school, and you I think call high school. They do their ordinary things alongside this, but there is a certain amount of emphasis placed on the music content of their education. And this means that when you come to Poland and perform, that you have a much higher proportion of young people in the audience than you do, say, in the UK. There's a much wider interest in this kind of music because it's ingrained in society that music is an important thing. And this is something valuable we have to learn from the Poles.
We have to learn it, but we used to know it. And this is only something I read a while back, but in the 19th century, for example, if you had finished law school and you wanted to have a good law practice, the way you was to do a very nice concert, playing the piano, the classical guitar.
That's a great idea. I like that. See, I could suggest that to my girlfriend. You know, she did the law degree thing, and she also plays some lute. So I would say to her, look, you need to do a good concert and talk about law.
But that was the way forward in society, because if people saw that you were a superb musician, then they must have thought, maybe there would be a good attorney also.
I think what they probably thought was that you were a rounded individual as far as your education was concerned. If you got law and music, or if you're a philosopher and a physicist, and you also play really good piano, you know, then it really shows off. It's like a CV, isn't it? I mean, it really shows off that you're a rounded person educationally, I think. It's good. I can only do the music myself, but there you go. I'm not rounded. Only down here.
So one thing I wanted to ask you is, do you guys have in mind that you may make a CD in a recording studio of a selection of this music?
Yes, we would like to do a recording of this music. Yeah, hopefully soon.
We have plans.
Because I think that that would be extremely useful. My own sense of things from here, very far away in the west coast of the United States, is that this is really a treasury of music. It's important. It can be of so much enjoyment and use for guitarists, particularly because that's what I'm more involved with. And there's nothing like some fine recordings to help people get started in that, as well as, of course, to have a book where people can also get the sheet music, whether it's tablature or standard music notation, to initiate the exploration of those things.
Yeah, we do have plans. They're quite advanced. They're not signed and sealed, but we do have it in mind that over the next 6 months that we aim to get together specifically for that very purpose. And I think a lot of the music again will be. I mean, it's possible that we don't know yet. We don't know how well we'll play over the next 3 or 4 days. It's possible we'll have some live stuff and some studio stuff. I've always enjoyed the live sound. If you can really nail a piece live, there's nothing quite like that sound. But at the same time, it's also of fundamental importance to play the sort of more technical stuff, possibly in the studio, where you can really refine over a period of hours what you're going to do. Sometimes you just hit it right, and it works out. So who knows? Maybe we'll have Ben and Andrea live in Ribnik CD. But otherwise, we're certainly planning to do a studio recording in the next few months.
Oh, that would be great. So I think that I wanted to mention to people who are going to be viewing this that when this video is posted into YouTube, that we will include links to Andrea's website, Ben's website, the Dieci Salfield Duo Facebook page, where people who are interested in exploring and deepening their connection to what you guys are doing can have wonderful links beyond this particular interview.
That's great. I think for us, we just want to go around the world playing this music in front of new audiences. So we're currently looking at some possibilities next year for Germany and Hungary and Italy, and we're looking further afield as well. We're hoping at some point to come to the United States, but that depends on the viewing audience in the United States wanting us to go, and particularly the promoters.
Exactly. So I want to thank you both very much for giving us time to have this interview. And it's really wonderful that it's just right at the beginning of your tour and your concerts there. I wish you all the best in the concerts. I wish I could be there. It would be so wonderful to be able to see you guys play. But that will take place hopefully not too far down the line. But thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey.
Thank you. I'd like to say also, before we go, I'd like to say a big thank you to Franciszek and Katarina Wieczorek from Modern Concert Agency here in Poland, who have been so kind. And they're not the biggest agency, but they're certainly the most efficient and that I've ever worked with. And they get the job done, and everything works like clockwork. So a big thank you to them for making this possible.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. It's not always easy, to say the least.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Make this happen. So we'll be in touch soon. Thanks again, and thank you everybody for listening.